Okay, so let's try that again. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us at this press briefing with the President of the Human Rights Council, Ambassador Nazhat Khan of Fiji. As usual, the President would like to take the opportunity to brief you ahead of a regular session of the Human Rights Council. We have the 48th session about to start on Monday, the 13th of September. It'll last for 4 weeks until the 8th of October. It will prove to be a very busy schedule as usual. So the President will walk you through that momentarily. And before that, I just wanted to point you to the material that we shared with you last night. That is the A to Z guide. This is the user-friendly annotated agenda, if you will, the program of work for the 4-week session, as well as a list of the draft resolutions which have been announced at an organizational meeting of the Council on the 30th of August. And earlier this morning, the Information Service shared with you a background press release in English and French on the upcoming session. If any of you did not receive any of these materials, please do let us know, and we'll be happy to share that with you. So the President, again, will brief you just now with opening remarks. We'll take Q&A, and then we have a few remarks at the end of the session. So over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much for that introduction to today's press briefing, and good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. I hope that over the summer you've all managed to take some sort of break. And I hope that you've been able to see your families over the summer. And of course, the reason for this press briefing is to brief you about the work of the Human Rights Council in the upcoming 48th session. We have been very busy over the summer, over the June-July period. We, of course, held the 47th regular session over a record 3.5 weeks. And in addition to that, the Council's Advisory Committee has held its 26th session, and the Council, of course, held its 31st special session on the serious human rights concerns and situation in Afghanistan. May I say at the outset that the work of the presidency would be impossible without a supportive and strong bureau, and I'm very fortunate to have the support of an excellent bureau, the ambassadors of the Netherlands, Bulgaria, Bahamas, and Somalia. Let me turn then to the upcoming 48th regular session of the Human Rights Council. And at the outset, may I say this, that because of the continuing situation with COVID-19 and related restrictions, the session will be held in a mostly virtual format, similar to the 47th session. But this time, we will be based in our traditional home, and one that I think we all prefer and like, and that is room 20 of the Palais for the duration of the session. We will continue to do our best to ensure that the session is inclusive, that it allows for the effective participation of all stakeholders, including civil society and presenters. And we are doing all we can to ensure that you, the media, can follow and report on our activities efficiently. Let me turn to the program of work. This will be the first time that we have a September session spanning over 4 weeks. And it really is an indication of the challenging situation of human rights around the world and the resulting increasing workload. So we should expect that the Council needs to deliberate on these issues for longer than previously. You have, of course, as you've heard from Rolando, the usual background documents to guide you in this presentation, and I will not go into details because you have them in front of you, but may I give you a brief overview? We expect 87 reports to be presented. 30 human rights experts and groups will address the session, and there will be 32 interactive dialogues, 5 enhanced interactive dialogues, and 6 panel discussions over a period of 19 days. A wide range of thematic issues will be addressed. These include water and sanitation, unilateral coercive measures, truth, justice, and reparation, the right to development, slavery, rights of women and girls in conflict and post-conflict situations, arbitrary detention, the rights of older persons, enforced disappearances, mercenaries, hazardous substances and wastes, the rights of people of African descent, racism, and many other thematic issues. As has been the case since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, COVID-19 will feature as a sub-theme on a number of reports and discussions this session. On the opening day, Monday, the 13th of September, the session will begin with the presentation of the oral update of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, which will be followed by the presentation of the High Commissioner's report on Venezuela and oral updates on Afghanistan, Nicaragua, and Sri Lanka. Let me point out at this stage that the oral update on Afghanistan stems from the resolution which was adopted by the Council at the end of the special session on Afghanistan that we held on the 24th of August. In the afternoon of the 13th, the Council will hold an enhanced interactive debate on the High Commissioner's oral update on human rights in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. And on the 1st of October, the Office of the High Commissioner will present a report on the allocation of water resources in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. We also have scheduled 6 panel discussions. One on unilateral coercive measures and human rights. The focus of that panel discussion will be unilateral sanctions, jurisdiction, and extraterritoriality. Second, on the integration of a gender perspective throughout the work of the Human Rights Council and that of its mechanisms, with a focus on the gender-digital divide and COVID-19. Third, a panel discussion on the human rights of Indigenous peoples facing the COVID-19 pandemic. This panel has a particular focus on the right to participation. Fourth, on deepening inequalities exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and their implications for the realization of human rights. Fifth, a panel discussion on the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training. And lastly, sixth, on the promotion and protection of human rights in the context of peaceful protests. Please note that the last 4 panel discussions I've mentioned will be made accessible to people with disabilities. On the last 2 days of the session, the 7th of October and the 8th October, as scheduled at present, the Council will take action on a series of draft resolutions. Part of the material you would have received is a list of 21 draft resolutions, which have already been announced by states at our organizational session on the 30th of August. But we should expect additional information on the draft texts to be tabled and considered at the session later. The draft resolutions that we have had notice of speak to a wide range of issues that testify to our expanding mandate and our commitment to address human rights issues through meaningful dialogue with the hope of improving people's lives across the globe. Informal consultations on these draft resolutions will be held virtually on WebEx or another link organized by the main sponsors. As it was for the past recent sessions, the informal consultations will be listed on Sprague, and you will need to contact the organizers for access. Before concluding the 48th session, the Human Rights Council is scheduled to appoint 3 new special procedure mandate holders. Firstly, the Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights. Secondly, the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent, a member from Latin American and Caribbean states. Thirdly, the Working Group on the issue of human rights and transnational corporations and other business enterprises, a member from the Latin American and Caribbean states. Unfortunately, side events, which were so much a highlight of sessions in the past, will still not be held and cannot be held inside the Palais. However, information about virtual events organized in parallel to the Council will be listed on the OHCHR Civil Society webpage. So having said all of that as an overview, I would like to conclude my initial remarks. I thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions. Over to you, Rolando.
Thank you kindly, Ambassador, for those opening remarks. Indeed, a very busy schedule ahead of us. So now over to you for your questions. It's a quiet room for the moment. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I do see that now. The little yellow hand, pardon me. So Catherine, over to you.
Yes, good morning, Madam Ambassador, and good morning, Orlando. Nice to see you both. Thank you for briefing us this morning. I'd like to know if anything is scheduled about the situation in Guinea. I know that it just happened and maybe you haven't had time to discuss the matter, but do you think that something is going to be scheduled later on? Thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much for that question. The answer is not at present. Of course, it is open for member states to table draft resolutions later on in the session about any subject that they think is of interest to the Council. At present, I have no information about that, and I'm not aware if there will be any discussion or resolution or decision on Guinea.
And of course, if I may just add, of course, be mindful, as always, that general debates are always an opportunity, as long as within context of the general debate that other issues can be raised, including a situation in Guinea, possibly. Okay, we have in the room, Agnes. Please go ahead, Agnes from AFP.
Yes, good morning. You say that the session will be mostly held in a virtual format. What do you mean exactly? How many diplomats will be allowed to enter the room, and for the journalists? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I believe that the modalities will be very similar to the modalities we had in the last 47th session. And the restrictions on modalities really have been twofold. One, of course, comes from the COVID-19 restrictions and the requirement to physically distance, according to the regulations and rules of the federal Swiss authorities. But the second is that the building itself is undergoing renovational work. And as a result of which some of the rooms that were available previously, 47, for instance, in the 46th session, are no longer available to us. And I think at the top of that list must be the Assembly Hall, which had the largest capacity. So the difficulty is that room 20, which of course is the traditional home of the Council, has a far smaller capacity for the numbers of people that can enter that room than we had in the Assembly Hall. And the room 20, has available seats for 148 seats with microphones. And if we exceed the number of the delegates that go into the room, of course, we will be breaking the Swiss regulations. So what was decided in the last session was that during the session itself, there would be a preference for virtual interaction through Zoom. And exceptionally, for those delegations which could not use the Zoom for some technical reason, they could come into the room. But at the end of the session, when it came to the adoption of the draft decisions, we had everyone who represented a member state in the room +1. So we had 1 + 1 for each delegation representing a member state of the Council. And because of the restrictions in the room, we could not let observers in any sort of shape or form, and everyone else was observing on the webcast. So the votes were taken in person in the 47th session. And at present, because the modalities appear to be heading for the same sort of shape, it appears that we will have a very similar kind of format as we had for the last session. I have to say that a number of delegations have expressed sadness about this, and we all prefer in-person interaction. Of course we do. Meetings are enriched when we meet in person, but really we have the difficulty arising from two sources. One is the unavailability of rooms because of the renovation works, and the second is COVID-19. And so therefore, I don't see that we have much room to choose, regrettably. So that really is where we are for the modalities. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ambassador. If I may just add in as regards journalists' participation in the room, we are doing what we can to provide a space for them. The usual space over to the left as you enter the press gallery will have a number of seats allocated for the media, should you wish to come in. And that also applies for the audiovisual journalist who would be able to film from the center of the room for a limited duration. We have Laurent Sierro from Swiss News Agency. Laurent, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. And thank you, Ambassador, for the briefing. You briefly mentioned Afghanistan, so a few questions on that situation. After the special session, there were quite a few critics by NGOs, but also by some member states on the outcome of that special session. Do you expect it to spoil, in a way, the proceedings, not only maybe on Afghanistan, but the tension that we could feel in that special session? Could it have any consequence on the proceedings? And then we could see with the World Health Assembly in the case of Myanmar that when a new regime arrived at power, there might be some problems in terms of credentials. Have you received any request from the new regime? And how concerned are you by the fact that the government, which was announced yesterday, is not as inclusive as the Taliban promised? Because you mentioned the importance of inclusivity when you raised the question of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those questions. And if I may take the issue of Afghanistan first, if you will recall, the resolution that was adopted by the Council at the end of the special session was adopted by consensus. And the consequences of that resolution was that there would be an oral update by the High Commissioner on the human rights situation in Afghanistan at this upcoming session, the 48th session, and that this would be followed by a comprehensive written report by the High Commissioner at HRC49. So very important that member states will be keeping on top of what is happening. And I'm sure everyone will be waiting anxiously to hear the updates by the High Commissioner in both those forms. In relation to the special session itself on the 24th of August, you will have noted that the Council moved quite fast on that, on the request of member states. And this is, of course, a member state-driven process, not just the procedure of holding a special session, but also the substance of what is discussed and the outcomes of a session is very much in the hands of member states. So really, as far as the presidency is concerned, we wait for states to come forward with the kind of solutions that they think fits the situation. And of course, it's very important for us to facilitate discussions which are inclusive, which are representative, and which allow for outcomes that reflect the wishes of the member states. So this is what I can say about the special session and the outcome. But of course, we know a discussion on Afghanistan is not over with the special session. There will be continuous discussion on Afghanistan, as there has been in the context of many other discussions, interactive debates and dialogues in the course of the Council sessions. And really, it's a matter for states to decide whether they want to take the outcome of the special session further and achieve another result. So we wait and see what member states would like. But I do want to note that the Security Council on the 30th of August adopted a resolution on safe passage. It addressed human rights concerns, particularly as it relates to women and children. And this was a resolution that was timely and, of course, welcomed by the Council. So on the issue of the representation of Myanmar, I think you asked about who was going to represent Myanmar. In relation to the credentials of any country represented in the Council, the rule is that when a delegation is accredited to the United Nations office in Geneva, then the names of the officials appear in the official Blue Book, and those are considered to be the representatives of that particular country to the Human Rights Council. Of course, what happened in the last session was that we had two competing applications for registration, and the Council voted to proceed with the debates on Myanmar in the absence of either of those representatives, because of course the rule is that where there are two competing, and the rule from the General Assembly is that where there are two competing applications for representation, then the UN body should accept neither and wait for guidance from the General Assembly as to who is the correct representative. So that is the general rule in relation to credentials for Myanmar. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Over to Jamil Shad, can unmute Jamil. Go ahead.
Hi,
Jamil.
Rolando, can you hear me? Yeah, yes, Ambassador, two questions. First of all, from the documents we could access on your website also, but also about the reports that we have planned for this session, many of them will not happen due to financial constraints. My question to you, how much does that impedes the work of the Council? What is the financial situation today, precisely of the Council and of this work, and when do you think it will be solved? That's from the financial issue. Second issue, you have a member in your Council, Brazil specifically, that has a government that yesterday requested basically population to go to the streets and promoted the idea of a coup d'etat. How do you feel about having such a member in your Council? Thank you.
Thank you very much for both those issues. The first is in relation to financial constraints. So as you know, when activity is mandated by the Council, then these activities are delivered by the OHCHR, working around these mandates. And in the past, last year, when as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, a number of mandates could not be delivered, then the Council agreed that they should be postponed. So this, of course, is a matter for the Council. When a mandate gets postponed because of non-delivery for some purpose, often beyond the control of anyone, then the matter must go before the Council again for a decision as to whether those activities can be postponed and to when. So in relation to the budget situation for the delivery of mandates, of course, it's a matter for the Council to decide. On other activities, I believe that the Bureau, the Secretariat of UNOG, and the Council Secretariat have worked very hard to make sure that the Council should continue its essential work. And I think we should be very pleased that despite the very difficult situation, the fact that we've had to move so far into virtual modalities, and despite the fact that many delegations have not been able to come to Geneva because of travel restrictions, I think we should be pleased that we have proceeded nevertheless. But in relation to financial constraints, I think that we have managed well within what is available. But of course, it's work in progress. Every year, the financial constraints are going to change with the times. And every year, we're all going to have to sit down and ask ourselves how we can deliver in accordance with what is mandated. And that ultimately has got to be our guiding light. What has the Council decided on, and what activities are mandated? We hope to complete the work program for 2021 efficiently. We hoped to do it safely. We hope that everyone who attends meetings will be not just safe, but able to have their voices heard efficiently and inclusively. So that is what I can say about financial constraints. In relation to any member state of the Council, and I have to say at the outset that there is no one country in the world which has a perfect human rights record. We all need to do a little bit of self-analysis about how we can all do better. And so the business of demonizing any particular country is not the business of the Council. Secondly, if there have been human rights issues or violations anywhere around the world, including those from those countries which are members of the Council, then it is for the Council to take action if it does. And it can do so in many ways, whether it is intervening in the interactive dialogues and discussions, both states as well as NGOs, whether it is by raising the attention of the Council in other ways, whether it is by putting pressure on member states to table resolutions. That's a matter for states and for NGOs. And the one of the most valuable things about the Council is this voice of the NGOs, which I've always called the conscience of the Council. And so I do hope very much that any situation around the world does come to the attention of the Council through the processes that we have all agreed to, and that those voices are heard. This is very important, that the voices should be heard. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ambassador. And before we turn to Nick of the New York Times, I just wanted Laurent rephrased his question, in fact, on credentials. He was referring to whether the Taliban made a request to the council, as did the military, as did the Tatmadaw military in Myanmar.
So the only credentials that we have on our books are the credentials from the permanent missions in Geneva. So as far as I know, there has been no request specifically for credentials coming from the Taliban authorities or from the military authorities in Myanmar.
Thank you for that clarification, Ambassador. Now over to Nick from the New York Times. If we can unmute Nick.
Good morning. Thank you for the briefing. Yeah, and good morning, Rolando. Nice to see you back. There have been some rumbles in previous sessions about the conduct of mandate holders. I wonder if you have any concerns about growing pressures to restrict the independence of mandate holders and how they conduct their mandates, and whether that's something that your office as president of the council is actively involved with in protecting. A second question was also, you talked about mandate holders. We hear something about the possibility of an initiative to have a special rapporteur on climate. I wonder if that's something you're conscious of. And as a diplomat from a Pacific Island state, are you not perhaps a little surprised that the Council has not been more active on the issue of climate and human rights, and how you would think it should take this issue forward?
Thank you for those questions. And in relation to mandate holders, there's always been a school of thought that either mandate holders have too much influence, as well as a school of thought that we should give mandate holders more room for the work that they do. I think that whichever section of opinion that you might come from, there is always room for further dialogue and discussion with mandate holders and with the coordination committee of the mandate holders. And to further that belief that I have, that there is a need for this dialogue, I organized a conversation between states and mandate holders, or the coordination committee of mandate holders, this year. And I believe that that discussion was a great success. Firstly, the discussion itself was expressed in a very constructive way. There were many examples of good practices of mandate holders, not just in relation to country visits, but also in relation to thematic reports. There was a lot of discussion about how difficult it was for mandate holders to do their work efficiently in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, and also a very strong message about the relevance of mandate holders to the Council, the importance of their work, and how this mechanism had done a great deal as an equalizing mechanism to further the implementation of human rights all over the world. And it's very important to know that mandate holders visit countries across the development divide. So we get reports about recommendations of how human rights can be further developed in developed countries as well as developing. And again, like the UPR process, this is a mechanism which is an equalizer. It's very constructive. The recommendations are always expressed in this constructive, forward-looking and progressive manner. And this view was expressed repeatedly in the conversation that I chaired this year, and I was very pleased to have organized that. I think it was a discussion that was valuable, and it really helped to nurture a better understanding between states and mandate holders. In relation to particular mandate holders, which may attract the disapproval of states as well as the presidency. I know that this year we've had that particular incident in relation to the former expert on privacy. Of course, we hope very much that mandate holders will do their work in accordance with the practices of the Council and the mechanism, and that the Coordination Committee will continue to exercise a good and firm influence over all mandate holders. And I believe that this is the case for most mandate holders. And so I'm happy to say that what occurred with the Special Rapporteur on Privacy is exceptional. It is certainly not, has never been experienced before. It was unprecedented. And I have to say that I believe that the Council approached it in exactly the right way. The reports of the mandate holder were delivered to the Council, and eventually, and of course, we now have a new mandate holder covering that mandate. And I have every confidence that the new mandate holder will do her work in a professional way, and one in accordance with the practices of the Council and of the mechanism. So I think generally, I would say this year, if I were to look back at the mechanism, and we've only just come out of an annual general meeting of the mandate holders, which again was largely held in person, which was something to be celebrated. But it was a very constructive meeting, and I addressed them, and I got a very strong feeling that there is confidence in the system amongst mandate holders. Talking to the states, I feel that there is equal confidence in the mechanism by states. So I think much has been achieved through this continuous dialogue and discussion, and I do suggest that this is a good practice for the future as well. On climate change, Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Marshall Islands, has announced an intention to table a resolution on a new mandate for climate change, a special rapporteur for climate change. And I'm aware that currently discussions are continuing amongst delegations. It is a very interesting discussion. It is being conducted alongside a discussion on whether it is time to recognize internationally the right to a safe and healthy environment, both very important discussions for the Council. I am in the hands of member states. What they decide to do, where the negotiations are going to lead, whether we're going to have a special rapporteur on climate change, this is ultimately going to be a decision that the member states and the Council will decide. And as far as my own views as a Pacific Island diplomat, I have to say for the whole of this year, that particular hat I'm not wearing. I am wearing the hat of the Human Rights Council. And so furthering the interests of my own country or my region through the Council is not something that the President of the Council should do. But I welcome the fact that climate change is a very important topical issue around the world, as well as the right to a safe and healthy environment. These are issues which everyone in the world should be interested in. I'm very pleased that the Council is inclusive enough and open enough to hear those discussions in a constructive way. And I look forward to the result of the negotiations to see where we've reached. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have a question now from Nina Larson of AFP.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Nina.
Thank you for taking my question. I actually just want, I'm not sure if I understood correctly when you were discussing the issue of accreditation for when it comes to Myanmar. I understand that we're still waiting for the General Assembly to decide who should represent Myanmar. And I guess, would you then expect the General Assembly to make that decision fairly quickly so that it could be applied during this session of the Human Rights Council, or is it something that would have to be applied later? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That the question of who should be given the legitimacy to appear and speak for a particular country in the relation to Myanmar was really because we had two competing applications. And the Human Rights Council has no ability to decide which of the two applications is the legitimate one and to whom we should give the floor. And so the rule is that where you have these two competing applications, that we wait for the General Assembly to tell us which is the legitimate authority. But I think the difficulty will be when we don't have two. So I think the situation in New York, which is the matter that currently is being perhaps decided by the General Assembly, and I don't have any up-to-date information about where that has gone in the credentials process in New York. But the current situation in New York, I think, turns on one application for speaking and not two. Whereas here in Geneva, what we had in the last session was a note verbal from the New York mission of Myanmar and a note verbal from the mission here in Geneva, both seeking to represent Myanmar. So what we're going to have in this session is not at all clear at this point. And I cannot give you more certain information because I don't know what is going to happen by the time the session opens on Monday. But if we do have two competing applications, we are left in exactly the same situation as we had in the last session, where the council will have to decide what it's going to do about the interactive dialogues and the discussions on Myanmar. But if we have only one, the situation is slightly different. At the moment, we don't know whether we're going to have one or two, and the matter will be decided first by Bureau as to what recommendations will be made to the Council, and then ultimately Council will decide as to what will occur. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Nina, if I would just suggest you contact our colleagues in New York who might have some insight as to when the Credentials Committee would take action on this issue. We have one, maybe perhaps a follow-up from Jamil, if we can unmute Jamil Shad. Go ahead,
Yes,
Jamil.
can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Ambassador, apologies again on Brazil, because it's a very blunt crisis happening just on the eve of your council. I'm not sure you followed yesterday, but what the president asked basically was basically attacking all the other powers, promoting a coup d'etat. The demonstrations that he organized were not at all democratic, and it is a threat. It is the biggest threat for democracy in Brazil for the last 40 years, and it's very real. It's not theoretical. It is real. My question to you, do you think, based on what you said, it is worth bringing the case of Brazil to the council, either by the NGOs? Do you hope that this case will be brought forward?
And my answer is the same, that that is up to member states. And we don't just have a political situation in Brazil. There are a number of other situations around the world which might require the attention of the Council. I can only say that if member states decide to bring this matter to the attention of the Council, if NGOs decide to bring it to the attention of the Council through their interventions or observer states, then the Council should be in a position to hear those interventions. This is my responsibility. My responsibility is to facilitate a place where these concerns can be raised. But I cannot raise them on behalf of any particular country or any particular peoples of the world. This is a member state-driven process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we've exhausted the list of questions. So with that, I would like to thank Ambassador Khan very much for joining us here. Before we wrap, I just wanted to one note on housekeeping. Shortly after this briefing, we will share with you the material from the group of eminent experts on Yemen who are doing a press conference at 3 p.m. in this room, in room 27. It'll be a hybrid press conference like this one. The group of eminent experts report, along with an executive summary and a press release, will be shared with you momentarily under strict embargo for 3 p.m. So just look out for that. It'll come from my colleague, Matt Brown. And on that note, I'd like to also introduce you once again to Matt Brown and Pascal Sim, a newer member of the Human Rights Council media team, who are joining us in person here in room 27. They will be at your disposal, as will I. So with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us should you have any questions. We'll certainly be sending you our media updates every evening, the night before, spelling out the program for the next day. And again, thank you, Ambassador Khan, and I wish you all a fruitful session. Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes, and one last note from Ambassador Khan, please.
I'm sorry, but on Myanmar, there was a question about the credentials for Myanmar. My information is, in fact, there are 2 requests at present, as of today, for the representation of Myanmar. So we are, in fact, in exactly the same situation we were in the last session. Thank you.
And thank you for clarifying that once again. And to all of you for joining us. Have a great day.